Well, let's move on to another hot topic that has engendered some conversation, and that is this question of the minimum wage. We have a viewer from Maynard who notes that the House has voted for a $9.50 indexed minimum wage, while the Senate favors $9.50 without indexing. It's in conference committee. Constitutional amendment was discussed and then withdrawn. Where do Senators Thompson and Eakin stand on a $9.50 minimum wage that's indexed to inflation? Senator Thompson, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would oppose it. And if you look at the objective data out there, it wasn't too long ago, I'd say maybe 3-4 weeks ago roughly, the Congressional Budget Office, which I don't think anybody considers a partisan organization on either side, put out some data indicating the degree of unemployment that would be caused by radically raising the minimum wage. I certainly don't agree we should index it for inflation. I don't think anything like that should be put on autopilot. The other thing, too, is it's really tough on our border cities. When you look at East Grand Forks, where I grew up, Moorhead, you look at of course, Duluth, next door to Wisconsin. They're competing in the restaurant industry and other industries with businesses across the state line that are just so much more competitive that it's very harmful. Now, people will say, well, Dave, don't you believe that the minimum wage helps some people? Oh, sure. If you happen to be one of those people that is earning, the minimum wage now, or earning $8 an hour, and if it gets raised to $9.50, sure, you benefit. But you got to look at the people that are going to lose their jobs. And again, this is not a partisan idea. This is something that objective analysts admit, and they say, yes, some people will increase their standard of living, but there will be a lot of unemployment, and unfortunately, among young and unskilled laborers who are the very people that we need to get engaged in employment and get to have experience and an opportunity to learn a work ethic.
Yeah, and I do support a minimum wage increase, and I actually did sign on to the $9.50 bill, and there's a lot of moving parts to it as well, however, and I've made it clear that I think we at the state level should make sure that we're practicing what we preach. And there are a lot of people that are dependent on us for their pay, including those that are working in nursing homes. It includes those that are providing services and taking care of people with disabilities and seniors in their homes through the waivered programs. And we need to make sure that they, too, are being given a wage increase. And I think it's important to note that with a minimum wage increase, we're talking about people who are going to put that money right back into their economy again. So it's going to really act as an economic stimulus to help promote more economic activity. And these are people who haven't had wage increases, or whose wages have been falling behind for years as a result of inflationary increases. And so I think it's time. The minimum wage has definitely fallen way behind what it used to be when you take into consideration the inflation. So I think it's time that it be done, and I think that it'll be good for the economy if we do so.
Your thoughts on the indexing piece, and what do you think is going to happen in these various committees where this bill is residing presently?
Right, and that's one of the moving parts that we're talking about, right, too. There's a lot of, it's not just the number and how long, there's the question of the phase-in as well. How long till we get to the $9.50? I think we're looking at, the 3-year phase-in before it steps up all the way to the $9.50. And then beyond that, whether there's going to be indexing and whether it should be indexed to inflation, or there's discussion, too, about whether there should just be a certain increase, for the next several years out. But certainly, I guess on the issue of indexing, I think that's still in question at this point. But I think the $9.50 level has probably been set. That's a tentative agreement between the House and the Senate conferees that have been working on this issue. But there's the issues of the training wage, of course, too, and there's about the small business minimum wage. There's a different minimum wage that would apply to small businesses. Currently, it's under $625,000 a year of income. I think that they're looking at that, or $500,000 a year and lower, to have a lower minimum wage for them. But a lot of moving parts. The indexing, I think, is still in question. But the conference committee is working on that right now, and I don't know what they'll come up with. But again, there was that tentative agreement to $9.50.
And the reason that there's a conference committee dealing with this is that there were, in this 2-year period, there were House and Senate bills that passed, and so it goes to the conference committee, even though they passed last year.
Right.
Senator Thompson, we heard some discussion last week for the first time about the possibility of this constitutional amendment to do the indexing piece, Is that dead now? Is that over, or is that still something that might surface before the session's over?
I don't know. Sounds like it's something that the Democrats have wanted to move. I find it mind-boggling that they have taken quite a bit of liberty beating us up for putting 2 constitutional amendments on the ballot in 2012, which, by the way, is below the average since the state was organized. But be that as it may, whether or not that was prudent, we've taken a lot of heat for having done that. And in fact, the majority leader, Senator Bach, had a bill in front of the State Government Committee that I sit in. Senator Dick Cohen, the chair of the Finance Committee, was having a companion bill there trying to require a supermajority of the legislature to get constitutional amendments on the ballot because they believe it should have a higher threshold. And then a week or two later, we're talking about trying to give people raises through a constitutional amendment. It's borderline humorous.
What do you think, Senator Eakin? Is that constitutional amendment to index, is that dead, or is that still alive in the legislature?
I don't think it's going to go anywhere because there was a significant amount of opposition towards using that method of resolving this issue. I think that one of the reasons it was brought forward is because I believe it's about 11 states that have done that with indexing, and I think all but one or so, it was most of them. I think almost all of them that did do it through constitutional amendment or did it through some kind of initiative and referendum.
Which, of course, Minnesota doesn't have.
Which we don't have.
Right.
So constitutional amendment is the only way that the people would have an opportunity to, take a vote on the issue themselves.